Hello and welcome back to the Azure DevOps course. In this lesson, we will explain the YAML pipeline triggers types. We'll explain 6 types, which are the CI pipeline trigger, the BR pull request pipeline trigger, the scheduling trigger, the external repository trigger, and the pipeline after pipeline trigger, and the container registry trigger. We'll explain those 6 types in this lesson. So first, let's start with the CI and BR and scheduling trigger. I made a pipeline to demonstrate how to use the 3 trigger types. So let's go to it. So I have entered the pipeline, which is for the CI and the BR and the scheduling, this pipeline. And that's how you trigger a CI trigger. The CI trigger is the default trigger in Azure DevOps. When you make any starter pipeline, you'll see the CI trigger. The CI trigger is a trigger that happens when you push a new commit in your repo. Okay, this CI trigger has a key, which is the branches, and you can include or exclude branch. When you include branches, the pipeline will be triggered when there is a new commit on this branch, and you can make it a list, so you can put a lot of branches in the include. And you can also use wildcard. So here I included release branch slash anything slash asterisk. So release slash anything will be included as a branch here, and you can also exclude. So we have included all the releases, but you can exclude from them all the temp releases. So we can exclude branches and include branches in the CI trigger. And also we can make the trigger based on a pass. So a pass key here, when you include a pass, you mean that if there is any change in this pass, in the files in this pass, in the source slash asterisk asterisk, so any file in any folder in the source folder, if there is a change in these files, the pipeline will be triggered. But if the change is not included in this pass, the pipeline will not be triggered. So that is the include pass. And the exclude is the opposite of the include. We exclude some passes that will not trigger the pipeline. So that is for the CI trigger. We can put all these options, the branches, the include, exclude, the passes for the CI trigger, which is similar for the CI trigger is the BR. A BR trigger is a pull request trigger. When I make a pull request on a branch, the pipeline will be triggered. So that is the BR trigger. And it has the same keys, the branches, the include, the exclude, the passes. So that is for the CI and the BR. You can use both of them, BR trigger and the CI trigger. And let's talk now about the scheduling trigger. A scheduling trigger, when you define a scheduling trigger, you type schedules as a key in the above and describe your cron schedule. Describe your cron schedule with the cron syntax. Here it is 00, means it is on 12 a.m. 00 means 12 a.m. and the time will be in UTC time format. It will be in UTC, Universal Time Coordinate. So that is the time region, UTC, and that is the format, the cron job. And you can also use a website for the cron job syntax. If you go on Google and type cron generator and enter the crontab.guru website, we can write here the syntax, and it will be displayed in a descriptive text. Like here, it means 54, it means at 4:05, and we make it asterisk here. It means at minute 5 in every hour, and they tell you the next time it will be triggered, next at this time. So you can use this website to generate your cron syntax. Okay, and you can also include and exclude branches. So by default, the scheduling trigger is scheduled if there is a change in a branch. So by default, the scheduling trigger is triggered if there is a change in a branch. So you can include branches and exclude branch. So if the time of the scheduling comes and there is no change in the branch, the pipeline will not be triggered. So you must take care of this info. But you can override this option by making a key which is always true. Always true means that the pipeline will be triggered even if there is not any change in these branches that is included. But if you hashed this key, now the pipeline will not be triggered if there is no change in this branch. So you must take care of this info. Okay, so I can now validate and save. And the pipeline now will not be triggered because this CI trigger and the BR trigger are for this specific process, and this process is not available. So the pipeline will not be triggered even I made a new commit. And if I return back for the CI BR scheduling trigger and click on it, if I click on the more actions here, I can see an option which is scheduled runs. If I click on it, it shows you the runs that will happen in the future by its date and time. So there's supposed to be a run in this time, in this time, in this time. So, and it also tell you the branches that is included in the scheduling trigger. So you can know when the pipeline will have a scheduling run. Okay, that's all for the CI and the PR and the scheduling trigger. Let's go for the resources triggers. We have three resources triggers: the external repository trigger, the pipeline trigger, and the container trigger. So I will start with the external repository trigger. I made a pipeline for it. So to make your pipeline be triggered by a commit in an external repository, you need to define an external resource. So this resources key can be a repository, can be a pipeline, can be a container. So anything under the resources key is an external resource that is external from this pipeline. So this pipeline is linked with the shopping front end repo. So if we want to use another repo inside this pipeline, we must define this repo in the resources section. So I write repositories here and define the external repo. Here, the repository key, this is an alias name for the repository, that is its type, and that's its real name. This must match the repo real name, and that's the trigger for this repo. So our pipeline will be triggered if there is a change in this external repo main branch. So it is the same for the trigger that's above. That is the trigger for the external repo. So you can make branches include, exclude, and passes under the trigger key. So now we defined external repo and define our pipeline to be triggered by it. Also, we can check out this repo. So we can use it inside our pipeline. To check out the repo, we write check out and the alias name we have defined above. Dash check out and the alias name that is defined here. So now we have pulled the external repo. So we can use it in our pipeline. So if you have check out an external repo, you must write a check out step for the current repo, which is check out self. So you can pull your current repo and external repo. And I made here a script to show the two repos folders. So you know the two are fetched, so we can use the both repos in our pipeline. And the ref here, this ref key means that is the branch that will be pulled when you make a check out with this external repo. That is the ref, the branch that will be pulled when you make a check out with this external repo. So that's all for the repository external resource. If we try to run now, this script should list the two repos directories that we check out. It should list two directories, the self repo directory and the external repo directory. So let's try and run to see the output of the script. So now the pipeline has finished. It checked out the current repo and the external repo. So if you go to the script that lists the directories, we should now see two directories, the Azure DevOps course and the shopping front end app, which is the two repos directories. So that's good. We have finished now the external repository trigger. So let's talk about the pipeline resource trigger. For the pipeline resource trigger, I made two pipelines. One is the source pipeline and one is the dependent pipeline. When the source pipeline finishes, the dependent pipeline should be triggered. So the source pipeline here make a very simple logic. It echo a text only. So that is the source pipeline. If you go to the dependent pipeline, this pipeline, the dependent pipeline, should be triggered when the source pipeline run is completed. So to make this pipeline be triggered when the source pipeline finishes, we must define a pipeline resource in this resource section. We write pipelines under the resources section and write the first pipeline in a list. That is an alias name, and that is in the source. That is the real pipeline name. It should match the real pipeline name. And to make our dependent pipeline be triggered when this pipeline finishes, we write the trigger key and write the branches and the include for the trigger. So that's about the pipeline resource and the pipeline trigger. And you can also use some metadata from the source pipeline. This metadata is like the pipeline name, the source pipeline run ID, the source pipeline branch. So you can use a metadata from your pipeline resource. You do that by making by writing resources dot pipeline dot the alias name that we defined. This is the alias name dot the variable name, pipeline name or run ID. These are the variables or the metadata that we can use from the pipeline resource. So you can print the metadata of the pipeline resource and use it in your pipeline. So let's try make a run for the source pipeline and see if the dependent pipeline is triggered or not. So let's go back to the source pipeline and run it. Run the source pipeline. The dependent pipeline should be triggered when this source pipeline is finished. The source pipeline has finished. If we return back, we should see the dependent pipeline is triggered. If you refresh, and exactly, the dependent pipeline is triggered now after the source pipeline has finished. And the dependent pipeline now should print the metadata from the source pipeline. So if we go to the echo, it printed the source pipeline name and source pipeline run ID and the source pipeline branch. We have extracted a metadata from the source pipeline. Okay, so that's all for the pipeline resource. Let's go for the container resource trigger. If I turn back, I have made a pipeline for the container resource trigger. Let's go and talk about it. So the container trigger make our pipeline triggered when there is a new image is pushed to your container registry. So you choose your container registry, you choose the repo name. You can also filter the tag that is pushed in your repo. And when there is a new push to an image tag to this repo in your registry, the pipeline will be triggered. So that is the container trigger. So to make a container trigger, you must define a container resource. Like here, under the resources key, you define a containers key and make the container list. This container list, you define the type. The type is ACR, Azure Container Registry, and that is the alias name of the container. And here is the Azure subscription that is used to authenticate with your Azure subscription account. This Azure subscription was created by default in the service connections. If you go in the project setting, in the service connections, we see here the Azure subscription service connection. We copy this name and put it here in the Azure subscription. And that is the resource group of the Azure Container Registry. And that is the registry name, the repository name. And here the trigger, you must write the trigger key so that the pipeline will be triggered when there is a push in the repository shopping front end that is inside the registry, Azure DevOps registry. And you can also filter when the trigger happens by tagging. So we include only the tags that has stg-anything. So when there is a push that has, for example, prod-anything, the pipeline will not be triggered. It will be triggered when there is a new image tag with a staging at first in its name. So that is the container image resource. You can also, like the last pipeline resource, you can use a metadata for your container by typing resources.container dot the alias name of the container, the alias name, and you can access the registry name by using this metadata variable, and the repository name using this metadata variable, and the tag name using this metadata variable. That is the metadata variables for the container resource, like the pipeline resource. So let's try and make a push for the shopping front end repo that is inside this registry with a tag that starts with SDG. We will make this push using the AKS release that we have created in the classic pipeline section. If you go to releases, we have made an AKS release in the classic pipeline section. This AKS release built a new Docker image and push it to the ACR registry. So if you make create release, we will choose it to run only on the staging, which changes the prod to be from automated to manual. So only the staging stage will be triggered. So if you create now, the new release should push a new image in our container registry repo with a tag that starts with STG. If you go to the logs, now the build and push task is running and it is completed. If we return back to the pipelines, the container trigger pipeline is triggered and it's running now. And if you go to the print image registry, it really printed the image registry name using the metadata of the container resource and the image repo and the image tag that starts with STG. So we have finished this lesson. We have explained all the types of the triggers, the CI and the pull request trigger, and the scheduling trigger, and the external repo trigger, and the pipeline trigger, and the container trigger. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and see you in the next lecture.